Hello, everybody, and welcome to Uproot Reddit. As Mr. Rogers always says at the beginning, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Won't you be my neighbor? Honestly, who wouldn't want to have Mr. Rogers be their next door neighbor? But sometimes, just like getting a randomly selected roommate to live within our college dorms, getting a nice neighbor is a 50-50 chance we all have to take. Unfortunately, Reddit user The Little Spooky Girl has dealt with one of the creepiest neighbors in today's post, Worst Neighbor Ever. Here's the full story of what happened. Last year, after a blissful first year of living in a new apartment, all on my own for the first time, a man moved in next door that I will never forget. The layout of the apartment is crucial to understanding this incident, so I made a little diagram, floor plan taken from the closest thing I could find online and edited. The most important part is that my balcony and his balcony are only partially separated by a wall. There is a solid 2-foot gap in which you can easily walk from one to the other. That's a big nope there, good buddy. Unfortunately, I don't think apartment landlords would allow you to fill that gap in. For context, I previously had a very lovely woman living next door for the entire first year I lived there who never crossed this balcony threshold without being explicitly invited. I only throw this in there so you can understand I wasn't previously concerned about someone infiltrating my space. The first time I met this new neighbor, he was unloading groceries from his massive truck into the assigned parking spot next to mine. The truck is going to be important for later, so make sure you remember this guy had a massive truck. And we continue. As I was driving up, he and a girl I assumed to be his girlfriend were unloading boxes from Costco. I noticed them speaking, and as soon as I was out of the car, they were silent. I nodded to them, proceeded to the elevator, and the guy ran up behind me, threw some boxes down, and begged me to wait. No problem, I'm a good neighbor. While in the elevator, the girlfriend refused to make eye contact or speak to me. A little weird, but I just thought she was shy. But he quickly introduced himself and was extremely chatty. In the 45 seconds it takes to get to the floor where our apartments were, he asked how I liked the place, where I was from, and where I worked. Looking back, his enthusiasm was a little strange, but I chalked it up to him being excited to be in a new place. For the sake of the rest of the story, let's call him Sam. Sam was maybe 33, 6 foot tall, with a slim muscular build and had hair buzzed extremely short, as if to mask his balding. Pretty average looking by all accounts. The first few weeks we run into each other often, and he always makes small talk, and always refers to me as Miss. I assume it's because he forgot my name, but wanted to be polite. I almost never see his girlfriend after the first night, but occasionally I can hear him talking to a lady in his apartment as the walls are reasonably thin. Thin walls, an important part of the story. Here's why. One night about 3 months after Sam moved in, my boyfriend is spending the night and we were watching movies on the couch. It's maybe 11:30 p.m. The back of my couch is against the wall I share with Sam, and we hear some banging noises. My first thought is that him and his girlfriend must be getting it on. Boyfriend and I laugh and turn the volume up a bit to drown them out. Then, in addition to the banging, the neighbors begin screaming. We can hear objects being thrown, glass shattering. The words are muffled, but there's distinctively anger and crying going on. My boyfriend, gem that he is, steps onto the semi-shared balcony and in his loudest voice yells over, without crossing onto Sam's balcony, "Everything okay in there?" The girl opens the sliding glass door on Sam's side a minute or two later and says, "Sorry about that." So we leave it alone. I'm concerned, but we have no idea what actually happened and decide to go to bed. Big mistake, I know. I wake up around 3 a.m. to more screaming. But my boyfriend refuses to wake up, and I'm not about to take my 5-foot self to break up whatever is going on at 3 a.m. I considered calling police, but was so drowsy, I convinced myself I dreamed it. I deeply regret that decision. The next morning, I woke up to some terrible personal news, an entirely unrelated death of a friend, and pretty much put the events of that night on the back burner. I didn't forget, but it also wasn't on my mind. Fast forward about 2 weeks. I'm outside reading a book in a robe, sports bra, and shorts. I'm in a chair that faces away from Sam's apartment, so I can't see his side from where I am. I'm deep in my book when suddenly I get tapped on the shoulder. Sam is standing behind me and asks if we can talk for a second. This man has already crossed an, albeit invisible, line by coming on my side of the balcony. But I also can't get to my door without physically moving him aside, so I ask him what's going on. Okay, already I'm seeing a lot of red flags with this. He told me it was his birthday and asked if I knew where to get weed because I seemed like a girl who knows how to have a good time. As we live in a state where weed is legal, I told him that I'm sure Google would provide the best dispensary in the area, but I personally didn't have any. He proceeds to tell me how drunk he got last night, and at this point, I am itching for an exit. As I start to move as if to signal I'm done talking, he reaches out from my shoulder and tells me he hit/scratched my car last night because he was driving very wasted. Remember his massive truck? He says all of this with a smile on his face, almost laughing. I'm surprised, but mostly want to get away from him because my creep senses are starting to tingle, and I don't want to blow up at him for hitting my car. He says he'll send me his insurance info if I give him my number, and thankfully, I knew that would be a bad call. I make a bad, nervous joke about knowing where he lived and said if the damage was bad enough, I would knock on his door to get his insurance. He counters by saying he will leave a note with his info on my door. He retreats from my balcony while also saying he'd prefer to just pay me cash and not involve insurance. I give it an hour or so and then I head down to assess the damage. I did this because I didn't want to walk down at the same time as him / risk having him follow me. Sure enough, there are 2 long new scratches on the driver's door. They're not deep, just kind of superficial or worthy of a call to insurance immediately. I really just didn't want to get involved with him in any way, so I decided I could deal with the scratches. But this little event has kind of shaken me. At this point, I knew something was off with him. Nothing unusual happens as far as I'm aware this night. The next day is a Saturday, and as I had to work the next day, I am home alone, watching some action-y movie, and it's around 11 p.m. I'm on the sofa with my cat curled up on me, and the movie is relatively loud, so it takes me a little while to register this banging noise coming from the hallway of my apartment building. I honestly only noticed because my cat had woken up and got all puffed up and freaked out. I turned down the volume of the film, and suddenly, the banging is getting louder and louder. And just as I stand up, I hear the 5 words no one wants to hear coming from their door. "Open up! It's the police!" My stomach dropped to the floor. I had lied to Sam the day before. I totally had weed. And I had smoked a joint outside on the balcony, the part farthest away from Sam's, maybe 20 minutes before. I'm totally panicked, high as a kite, and trying to control my breathing so I don't immediately come off as suspicious before I answer the door. I remember checking the peephole to see a close-up of a cop's face, and then opening the door, coming face to face with 6 officers, all with guns drawn. I am about 0.5 seconds away from completely peeing my pants in fear, still convinced I'm somehow in trouble for smoking a joint. The officer who seems to be in charge can sense instantly the level of my panic, and he says, "Ma'am, you're not in trouble. We need to speak with you about your neighbor. Can we come in?" At this point, I'm reeling and my whole being is tense. I let the cops in, but my heart hasn't moved from my throat. The policeman in charge asks me about any interactions with Sam. I tell them I barely know him, that he just lives next to me, only moved in a few months ago. I ask why they needed to be in my apartment. I'm scared, but also I don't typically get along with cops, and I have the right to know why 6 of them practically waved their guns in my face. The lead officer proceeds to tell me that Sam is a bad guy. He apparently beat his girlfriend so badly the night prior that she was now in the ICU for her injuries. They also told me Sam had a gun and had barricaded himself in the apartment next to mine. They said they had spoken to my building manager and knew my place had access to his balcony and they needed to use it. Then they asked me to go into my bedroom and lock the door / turn the lights off. The next 30 to 45 minutes were absolute horror. In my panic, I had left my cell phone on my kitchen counter and had to sit in my room just listening to the commotion. No shots were ever fired, but there was a lot of yelling and what sounded like things being thrown. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime, the main officer knocked on my door and told me that Sam had been arrested and thanked me for letting them use my apartment. They asked me questions for maybe 15 more minutes and left. I wish this is where the story ended, but there is a bit more. In the days following Sam's arrest, I became even more panicked about him coming back to the apartment building, worried about retaliation. I hadn't said anything to the police to technically incriminate him. I had proof of nothing except his word that he was the one who scratched my car. But I did tell them about the night my boyfriend and I heard them fight. About 5 days later, Sam reappeared at the building as I was coming home from work one evening. He tried to approach me, but the elevator shut just as he was running to catch it. My whole body got tense, like the feeling when you come this close to getting in a car accident, but narrowly avoid it. I stayed off my balcony entirely from this point and always kept the curtains closed. We didn't speak or really see each other at all for another few weeks, and then had our final interaction. Sam stopped me in the parking lot one night, running after me as I was about to get on the elevator. He begged me to tell him why I let the cops in that night. I told him the honest truth, that I was stoned, didn't know what to do, and had a bad history with cops. This is all true, and again, I was concerned about him trying to retaliate. He then got pretty upset and kept trying to repeat the question, obviously wanting a different answer. When I couldn't give him one, he then offered me $3,000 to testify as a character witness on his behalf because I knew him and knew how he really treated women. I was speechless and very freaked out. He told me his hearing was the next Thursday morning and he asked if I could show up. I was like a deer frozen in headlights for a moment and then somehow got the heck out of there after mumbling a string of words that were most likely incoherent. The Wednesday night before this trial, I came home from work and my cat was acting kind of weird, like something had just spooked her, and her tail was puffed out. I kind of shook it off, but I noticed through the curtains there was something taped to the outside of my sliding glass door. Apparently, Sam had left a post-it with his phone number and a name, and underneath, "I am counting on you." Needless to say, I never showed up. I took a photo of the post-it, grabbed my cat, locked all my doors, and stayed at my mom's house for about 5 days after that happened. I did phone the police to let them know he had been on my balcony again, but they never followed up with anything. Eventually, my boyfriend came and we went back to my place together. Everything was as it should have been. I never saw Sam again, but a few weeks later, a lady I had never seen before was cleaning out his apartment. Maybe a month after that, new people moved in and things have been normal ever since. I tried calling the police and the county jail to see if he was in lockup again, but no one was able to release information to me. I'm hoping that means he's there, if he did what the police said he did. So, to Sam, I will say, I'm not really sure what happened, but my biggest regret is not calling the police when I felt like I should have in my gut. Let's never meet again. And here's an update worth considering. Quote, a comment made me realize I left out something really important. Before the new people moved in, I ran into my building manager and had a chat with him about Sam. In an attempt to discover if Sam had been evicted or if he went to jail, the manager disclosed the girlfriend did pull through. I never knew her name, so I couldn't follow up with trying to see if she was okay with local hospitals, plus HIPAA. The manager did tell me Sam was made an exception to break his lease, but he couldn't confirm whether or not he was in jail. Also, per a commenter, I looked up my county's inmate list and can't find his name, but I'm not sure if the name he gave me was his legal name or just what he went by. I don't have much else to go off of, sadly. Okay, that's one dude I wouldn't want to be my neighbor. Just hope he's way far away from the apartments now. Now, little spooky girl did what she could in that situation that bettered her chance of being safe. You know who else bettered their chances of safety? But just by a slim chance? Reddit user Ruth Slater did. They narrowly escaped what could have been a traumatizing experience. In today's post, I had to trick a creepy man into believing my family was waiting for me when really I was going to an empty house. Now, don't let the title fool you. Let's look at the full story to better understand the situation. Hi readers, sorry if my spelling isn't great, but I hope you enjoy. For some background, I live in the UK and go to a school with a uniform. I go to quite a large all-girls school with about 8 classes of 30 per year, with 5 years and a 6th form attached. So I have heard about creeps lingering outside of the school before, but they're usually sorted out quite quickly by school staff, I guess. At the time, I was in year 9, so just 13 and about 4'9". I had a big homework assignment due, and because I didn't have a computer at home, I stayed late at school to do it in the ICT suite. As it was the beginning of the school year, it was relatively dark at 5 p.m., which is when I got out of school and this event took place. I had to get the bus home as both my parents were working. The bus stop outside my school was fairly busy. There was a couple of other people and me. I had my back up against a fence and noticed a man under the bus stop facing away from, but next to, the road and opposite the fence I was leaning on. I was aware of my surroundings as I have had previous experiences with old creeps, and I'm just a generally paranoid person. The man didn't strike me as particularly interesting, but I did notice him glance over at me from the corner of my eye. I then saw a bus and assumed it was mine, so I stepped forward to check. It was not my bus, which was annoying as I was cold and didn't have a coat. As I went to step back up against the fence, I almost stood back into the man that was under the bus stop originally, but he had moved to directly behind me. He had his arm up against the pole next to the bus stop, telling you the buses that come to the bus stop. I felt a bit cornered in, but couldn't move as the other side of me had all the people waiting to get on this bus that was coming. It felt like forever, as I could feel this man's breath on the top of my head. As I watched the bus came, and collect all the other people at the bus stop. But it was probably only a minute and a half. Once the last person got on that bus, I quickly moved out of this man's area and back against the fence. He moved, so he was back under the bus stop, sitting across from me staring at the ground. At last, my bus came after about 3 minutes, like that. I didn't want to give away the fact that I was getting on this bus, but I had to wave it down, so I stood next to the road to signal it over. As I got on, my heart was really going as the man was back behind me. I had already got my bus card out and scanned it very quickly and only saw a few people downstairs. Normally, there might be a few people upstairs in this case, so that's where I headed. That was probably my biggest success or mistake, I don't know to be honest. I got up there and it was completely empty. Great! Well, I couldn't really go back down at this point because I knew the man had already gotten on and would be coming up the stairs. So I did the next best thing. I sat in the outside seat directly in front of the bus's camera, which I kept looking directly at just in case something happened. And surely enough, the man came up the stairs as expected, and he sat at the right back of the bus, not before looking and smiling at me as he passed. It was then that I had the idea that probably saved me. I live on a quiet street and it was already dark now, so there was no way I was getting off this bus at my stop with this man. I pulled out my phone and earbuds. I put one bud in my ear and texted my best friend to play along when I FaceTimed her and informed her of the situation. She understood, and along with some small talk, I talked loudly about how my mom was so mad that I had stayed late at school and that she had texted me saying that she's waiting at the door for me. And I had told her that I was only 10 minutes away. In reality, I told my mom that I was staying late in the morning before I left for school, and now my mom was at work 45 minutes away, and so was my dad, about an hour and a half away, with limited access to either of their phones. I was at my stop to get off now, and I took a deep breath as I stood up. I looked back at the man, and he was looking at me as I walked down the stairs. My friend was screen recording at this point just in case something went down. Thankfully, he didn't follow me down, but as I was walking away from the bus, I looked back to see him up against the back window, hands in fists, staring at me. That is when I took my flimsy school shoes off and sprinted to my house. As the next bus stop was still in eyesight, there were two on the main road that led down to my street. Once I was down my street and far enough away that you couldn't see the top of it anymore, I told my friend about him up against the window. She understood, and I put my shoes back on and sped walked the rest of the way to my house. My family still doesn't know about this, even though I was quite proud of myself on how I handled the situation and how I had ran with no shoes on, a heavy skirt, and a big rucksack on my back. I don't think they'll ever know, because as much as I don't want to ever stay late at school ever again, I know I probably will have to again at some point. And I don't want my parents to feel guilty about not being able to help if something more serious was to happen while they were at work. But yeah, to the creepy man who doesn't know what personal space is, or frankly doesn't care, I hope we never meet again. After coming back to this post, I was overwhelmed at all the responses I got. I tried to respond to all of them as best I could. It seems like everyone thinks I should tell my parents, but I honestly don't think it was too serious of an event. But I will tell them next time the conversation comes up. I did tell the friend on the story, and the rest that knew, I asked my sister because I knew she would understand. She said I should tell my parents as well. I will. But that me telling my form tutor was enough. We hugged and it's all good. She was not demanding that I tell my parents though. I thought she would. I might update it when I do. Stay safe, everyone. Good job on the trick, Ruth Slater. Glad you made it out of that dangerous situation safely. And yeah, even though school uniforms are meant to be decent and modest, creeps will still be creeps. If you ever encounter someone like this while going home, or if you have creepy neighbors, always, always, always have your phone nearby to use whatever tricks necessary to pull you out of those situations. Well, that's all for today. We'll be back for more creepy encounters posts right here on Uproot Reddit. And as always, stay safe, everyone.